Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy to be here, and as requested, please put your name and affiliation in the chat. So I think everyone's already done that, which is good. So I'm Valerie Moore, I'm the Energy Manager of the City of Alexandria, and I'm the co-vice chair for Virginia. I see Alice on the call, and Maddie's not able to be here today. So moving on. We can go to the meeting minutes unless I'm missing something. Like I can go to the next item, right?
Yes.
Okay. The meeting summary for February was sent out for your review. So those who've not had a time to review it, will just give you a few minutes, basically 30 seconds, to kind of look at it and then see if there are any changes to the meeting summary. Okay. So are there any changes to the meeting summary? I would like to make any changes.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Nothing in chat, nothing. Okay, then hearing none, general consent is needed, so you don't need a vote. If anybody doesn't agree with the meeting minutes, I don't see anything, so otherwise we'll move on. Hearing none, the February 19th, 2026 meeting summary is considered final. And we're gonna go on to our next agenda item. So our wonderful COG staff will present the 2027 MWCOG Regional Environmental Programs Work Plan and Budget. The members are asked to provide feedback on the committee priorities. And I request COG to give us a deadline if members need more time to review and provide comments or questions. So I'm giving this to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Vice Chair. So while the presentation comes up on screen, I just wanted to give you an overview of COG's Climate and Energy Work Program and Budget. We are bringing it to you this month, and we expect to take it to CC next month for their review and adoption. So we want to make sure VIAC has time to review
Excuse me,
it.
Leah.
Yes.
I want to make sure we can hear you really clearly. It's still pretty fuzzy or sort of, it's not coming in super clear.
Yeah, it sounds like you're underwater.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm not sure
Turn off your
why.
camera, that might help.
Say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If you turn off your camera, that might help.
Ah, that's
How about
true.
that? Is that working? Hello?
Seems
Better.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are the members able to hear her okay?
Is everyone testing?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just have to hold it very close like this.
Sorry, Leah.
That's fine. Yeah, so BIAC, we want BIAC to have time to review before we take it to CPC. So I'd say by probably the end of this month, if you want to provide some written comments to us. Typically BIAC does not, but you may have this year. So yeah, we'll say by the end of the month, maybe the first month in May, if you have any comments, provided input. And let me know again if the sound is off. Next slide, please. And so a lot of the work, program and budget stays pretty consistent across the years. But then we have particular projects that that may change year to year that you request of us and that we're working on in partnership with the local governments. So most of the climate and energy team's work in the past 10 years has focused on supporting local government actions to meet the goals of our regional climate and energy action plans, as well as your own individual jurisdiction goals. And so we support the implementation of the Climate Action Plan with the region focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mainly building local and regional capacity in that space as well as in resiliency. So here on this slide, Here on this slide, we're highlighting the greenhouse gas reduction goals. The COG board obviously adopts the goals, and we coordinate with you with all the other committees under this program. And so we are supporting plans to meet the goals and then support the implementation of those goals. So we have the 50% by 2030 regional greenhouse gas reductions, and then currently the 2050 goal. We've all known these goals over the years. And I am seeing the slides are going off and on your end. I'm not sure why. And this triangle, there's a figure here showing a graphic here showing that clean electricity makes the biggest impact, and then zero energy buildings and zero emission vehicles. So those are the items or elements with the top.
Leah, it's getting difficult to understand you again. I guess turning up the camera wasn't enough.
Okay. Now? Is that better? Is that better?
I think so.
I think
You
so.
talking? We'll let you know.
Okay.
We'll get
All
your
right.
feedback.
Okay. So next slide. How about now?
That's better, actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
So this is the outline of the work program and budget. It is posted with your materials again, so if you have any comments, please let us know. There are 3 main program areas under the Regional Environmental Resources Management Fund: climate and energy, recycling and solid waste management, and regional forestry. So under climate and energy, there are 8 specific areas of focus. So much of the team's work falls under the climate and energy program area, and then we have a few others under recycling and forestry. So next slide, please. So here's the budget for fiscal year 27. It's a little close to $6 million. There is a $3.7 to $3.8 million difference from last year's total. The difference is in the grants category. So we have a lot more money in the grants category, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And all of COG, local government members pay dues directly to the front office, and each of the programs across COG get a certain portion of those member dues. So this year, it's important to say that the member dues is a little over 300K, and I'll add here that COG's overall budget will be limited over the next few years as a result of COG's role as landlord of the building. So COG member funds will be tighter, and that is reflected in the 300K that we're getting this year. Last year we got about $477,000 for member funds. So along with the member funds, the majority of our members pay towards a regional environmental fund, which is a little over $971,000. And so in the grants category, we leverage money to support local implementation. And this year, we still have some CPRG funds to use, and then the CFI charging and fueling infrastructure grant, which is a big chunk of that, with $4.27 million. So next slide, please. And is my sound working okay? I feel like it's, to me,
Your
it's
sound is going back and forth.
back and forth. Okay.
Unless the members say something, I can mostly understand everything you're saying, but it's not like really crystal clear.
My
And-
sincere.
And
I
Leah,
know.
Leah, if you change your headset, I don't know if that's possible, that might work, or if at any point you want me to try to take over, just let me know.
Yeah, I will have to see if I can have another headset in the office. Let's see if you all can.
Take
Well,
a pause
Maya,
for a moment.
do you have the presentation? We're really sorry about the technical difficulties. I do have another one at work, so it'll take me a minute to kind of change over. Oh,
I can actually
Melissa.
hear you better right now, but
Oh,
I've done this presentation a lot in the past, so I think I can wing it if needed. Just let me know.
yeah, go ahead, Maya, because it's good. I do have another, and but I don't want to take up too much time, so I will pass it over to you. My apologies for the technical difficulties here. So,
No worries.
okay.
Yeah, so as Leah was saying, we have a all COG members pay dues to the organization based off of population. And there is also, for the majority of COG members, a regional environmental fund that's added on to that covers a lot of the program costs here. But we also go after a lot of grants to leverage what funds you all do provide to provide added benefit. And so that gets us to the total of the 5.9 million on the screen. Next slide, please. It's still on. Who's working the slides right now?
Caroline is.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, but go ahead, Maya. You got it.
Can we go to the next slide, folks? Slide 5, please. Caroline, are you with us? Okay, here we go. All right, so we are with our project management plan. We're working on accelerating action to reduce greenhouse gases is like kind of an overarching goal, and we do that through a number of ways. A lot of our work focuses on EV, solar, tree canopy, and building efficiency, as well as climate resilience. Another priority that I would say is maybe added to our work program, for the first time very explicitly last year was data centers. And this was sort of emphasized this year with all the input and feedback and concerns expressed by BIAC and CPC members and stakeholders. So there's like a, renewed and new kind of emphasis there on continuing our work in that space. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to kind of walk through the umbrellas or the subcategories of our work program and budget. And kind of the first main one is climate and energy policy. So under this kind of umbrella of climate, energy, and policy, we support the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee. We support the development and implementation of the regional climate energy action plans. We also, track progress towards the goals of CPC and the COG board. So this is where we do the greenhouse gas inventory work, as well as a variety of trainings and tracking progress. Like in the next presentation, we'll talk a little bit about tracking progress. So as well as the legislative work. There's some tracking of legislation and policies and letter writing and whatnot through the CPC Legislative Committee. Next slide, please. So the next umbrella of our funding is you guys with the BIAC. So underneath this umbrella of funding, we support you all and the work that you all do and the trainings that we run at your request. We collect utility data annually and analyze and provide the results of that utility data. And we also have long had a subcommittee essentially to this group. It's the Regional Emergency Support Function 12 group. It's in partnership with our emergency response staff here at COG. And that's sort of like on an basis, but over the years, a lot of energy resilience, energy emergency type trainings and exercises and plannings happen underneath this umbrella. Next slide, please. Then we have an area where we focus a bit more on infrastructure. So a lot of the work underneath here over the years has been related to alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles, but as well as solar. We've done like utility capacity studies and stuff like that underneath this umbrella. A lot of the solar work over the years has gone under this umbrella, as well as green building and energy efficiency financing programs. Next slide, please. Then we have our adaptation and resilience umbrella that Amanda worked with us on for 10 years before moving to Rockville. So a lot of the resiliency studies and trainings over the years have happened underneath this umbrella. Some of our most recent projects have been the Military Installation Resilience Review Program, or the MIR program, where we've done a lot of resiliency, climate risk studies and analysis, and community engagement around bases in the region. And we cross-coordinate with our transportation resilience program, which has been very active lately. So we do a lot of coordination with them in the background on that work. Next slide, please. Our next umbrella funding is another key committee that works with us on climate and energy work, and that's our Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee. They advise both CPC and our Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, or MWAC, on everything climate, energy, and air quality related. And they meet a handful of times during the year. They also help manage and run the Climate Energy Leadership Awards, which has been, this is going to be the 12th year of the Climate Energy Leadership Awards, which just launched or is launching next week. Next slide, please. All right, so then we have an area of vehicle emission reductions. A lot of the coordination we've done over the years with the Clean Cities programs across DC, Maryland, and Virginia falls underneath this bucket, but as well as a lot of grant work. So a lot of the DERA grants fall underneath here, the diesel emission reduction grants, where Jeff has led us for 14, 15 years under these grants, where we have repowered across the region construction equipment, locomotives, tour boats on the Potomac, and the like. So next slide, please. We also, this is a little bit of our catch-all sort of umbrella of funding, but it comes with a lot of support to the COG board, where we have input and say into the COG board's budget and how we are going to be using that budget. And the COG board adopts their budget a little bit earlier in the year, and then after they adopt it, we're able to come to you with this work program and budget to kind of flesh out our portion of that budget. So we coordinate with them on that, and anything that happens to come up, like if they want to talk about utility infrastructure, or if they want to, for instance, the other year, a couple years ago, they were like, we really want to prioritize EVs, and here's some of the things that we want to see. That's some of the work that falls under this umbrella of COG board support. Next slide. John Snar has been running our solid waste and recycling program for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And he meets with, he has solid waste committees, recycling committees that work together to move the region towards, having more options for solid waste reduction and recycling and composting. This group has worked a lot on expanding composting options throughout the region. It coordinates America Recycle Day initiatives and programming. And yeah, expanding organics and composting has been really big. Next slide, please. The urban forestry program, Heidi's been leading this work for the past couple years. We have a regional tree canopy subcommittee, and they are working on a regional tree canopy action plan as we speak. So that's a big project for the upcoming year. Next slide, please. Yep, and there you go. There you have it. That's kind of an overview of the work program and budget. And like Leah said, I'm happy to take comments. I believe she said through the end of the month on this before we bring it to CPC the third week of May, where we'll be asking them to adopt the work program and budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Sounds good, Maya. Okay. Thank you, Maya. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Maya? I actually have one. You mentioned a Mid-Atlantic Climate Leadership. Just what is that? Is that like a regional, um,
Yeah.
and who would be part of that?
Yeah, so that also started like maybe 14, 15 years ago, and we were the Mid-Atlantic Sustainability Network. And it consisted of the major cities and regions across the Mid-Atlantic. So it was like us and Richmond and the Baltimore region, Delaware, and Philadelphia and the Regional Council in Philadelphia, Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh region. And we really were trying to find, you know, common ground, common issues, things that, you know, we could work together on beyond, you know, the COG region and learn things about what was happening across the Mid-Atlantic that we could bring back to you all. And it was coordinated by EPA Region 3. And we met once a year in person and had a few, you know, we had like quarterly meetings. And then when the first Trump administration came in, it kind of shut down a little bit. And then when it came back, it was really focused a lot on state agencies. And now we're sort of reviving it under this new administration. EPA is not as involved as much because they can't be right now. But we have worked with, we are working with ICLEI and WRI to relaunch this group this last I don't know, handful of months as the Mid-Atlantic Climate Network. So we had one meeting so far, and we brought some of the group in to talk about it at CPC last year, but then we've had like one real meeting so far with the group. There's like Annapolis is involved, the Norfolk region's involved, so it's expanded a lot. Yeah, so we are, you know, we're going to be doing quarterly meetings.
Yeah, there's a meeting coming up. I think Heidi's on the line. They had a February meeting and a May meeting. So I don't know. Heidi, did you want to jump in here and kind of explain some of what's coming up for the May formation or group discussion? Oh, Heidi's not here, but I don't know if
Yeah, I saw her hand go up too. Heidi, you're not here?
well, she's not in the office with me, but she is on the call.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, they meet quarterly and their next meeting's May 20th. And we are just, as Maya mentioned, getting it back up and running. And so if you want to be a part of these meetings, please put your name in the chat indicating so, and I'll get you on the invite for the series. And the May 20th, is going to focus on kind of like a version of the housing hub that Electrify DMV is discussing. There's going to be a Charlottesville model, and then also electrifying affordable housing in Philadelphia. So those are going to be the two speakers at the next one.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Anybody else have any other questions? If not, then Maya, I guess you're back up again. She's going to provide highlights of COG's final greenhouse gas inventories and a high-level review of the climate progress trends of key performance indicators from the last 15 to 20 years. This information is incorporated in the draft mid-course review report. BEAC is being asked to provide comments on the draft report, particularly on the priority focus areas and the next step conclusions, and we'll take questions after Maya finishes her presentation. So Maya, take it away.
Great, thank you. And while that presentation is being pulled up, we presented this at CPC in March, so a few weeks ago. And we had this impromptu, unofficial vote that CPC kind of participated in, that they wanted to make sure that this report states that we're not meeting our goals, that we're not on track to meet our goals, we're not going to meet our goals for 2030. I don't know that the data exactly says that. And we did, we have published a plan that shows a pathway to meeting our 2030 goals. And we have, that's the CPC's 2030 plan. And we also have the CCAP that we just published in November that also shows a pathway. So whereas the report currently says that, essentially it says that there is some good progress. There are some things that, might, a thing here or two that might not be moving in the right direction. But we need accelerated action in all of these areas in order to meet our goals. So it recognizes a huge need for expanded and accelerated action. The other thing that has happened since the CPC meeting is that we received a letter, a comment letter on the mid-course review. That's what we're calling this report. And the letter is from the Coalition of Smarter Growth, and it is signed on by 22 environmental nonprofit organizations from across the region. And this letter asks us to clearly state that the region's not on track to meet 2030 goals. They are asking for some edits to the graphs, some of the graphs that we're looking into. But essentially, they really wanted to speak strongly to the data centers, which it does. But also the importance of smart growth and transportation in this report. And so I'd be really curious to hear, we wanted to bring this to you today since we've gotten tons of comments in on this report. So I think it would be really good to have BEAC members' perspectives. And if you could, give us your comments before the end of the month, that would also be great. So just now that you have a little bit of the background of what's happened and the type of input that we might need, just gonna run through some of it, not all of it. I realize maybe some of you might have been at the CPC meeting a few weeks ago, so we're not going to go in everything in super detail, but we are going to provide some high-level stuff that specifically relates to BEAC. So essentially, this mid-course review is looking at our climate goals and some key performance indicators and presenting trends from the last 15, 20 years in these key performance indicator areas, and hopefully identifying where CPC might see that we need to course correct and stay on track or get on track towards our 2030 goals. Next slide, please. So what goals are we talking about? We're obviously the main goals that we're working towards, like we were talking about in the work program, is our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So the 2020 goal was 20% by 2020 below 2005 levels, and the 2030 goal is 50%. below 2005 levels by 2030. And then after the COG board in 2020 adopted that 50% goal, for a few years straight, they kind of went back and they were digging in and getting advice from CPC on, well, how do we prioritize things to make that happen? So in 2022, the COG board identified electric vehicles as a regional priority. In 2023, they endorsed a goal of 250,000 solar rooftops in the region by 2030. And then in 2024, they endorsed a goal of maintaining a minimum tree canopy coverage of 50% across the region as a whole. So those are the main goals that we're looking at, and we have a number of other key performance indicators that we are also looking at. Next slide, please. So these are all the key performance indicators we're looking at. The report has a section of the report for each of these sectors listed in the chart. These sectors align with our regional 2030 plan that was adopted by CPC in 2020. So we are looking at greenhouse gas emissions and what's driving greenhouse gas emissions. We are looking at how clean is the grid and how much, those solar rooftops are we getting in the region. We're looking at building energy consumption trends and green building, electric vehicle ownership and charging ports, vehicle miles traveled, transit ridership, waste diversion, and tree canopy. So next slide, please. So this is a sample page of the report, and each of these sections is laid out the same. So on the left side here, the beginning of the report is going to talk a little bit about the progress towards 2030 and how things are going. Then we have a section on key performance indicators and the trend charts. Then on the right side, each of these sections have a supporting local policies and programs section where we talk about high-level results from the survey, the Climate Action and Implementation Survey that we sent to local governments last year. And then based off of the results from those surveys, we provide some case studies, just a couple case studies per section. Next slide, please. I'd also say that we kind of modeled this after a recent State of the Maryland progress report. All right, so down into the results of these key performance indicators. Emissions has reduced by 20%, net emissions across the region between 2005 and 2023. We have had the exact expected bounce back post-COVID in emissions, but we are still meeting the 2020 goal by 2020. Next slide, please. So what is driving our greenhouse gas emissions is we have the red bars are what's driving up emissions, so growth in population and commercial floor area, as well as increased commercial energy intensity. And increased commercial energy intensity includes the growth in data centers. And then that is outweighed by what is driving down emissions across the region. So major drivers of why our emissions are reducing in the region is essentially a cleaner electric grid, cleaner cars on the road, and decreased VMT per person. Next slide, please. So the region and each of our local jurisdictions have final documents that have been produced for them, and the region as well. And so on the left here is an example of the first page of the regional greenhouse gas fact sheet. All local jurisdictions received a fact sheet, a greenhouse gas data summary file that goes into more detail, the contribution analysis model that gets you to that waterfall chart we reviewed on the last slide, the greenhouse gas methodology report has been updated, and we also have a short video that we posted regarding the regional progress. So each fact sheet has similar charts to the last two slides of the greenhouse gas trends over time, as well as the waterfall chart. And then it also has some factoids around more details of the results as well. So for the region, emissions have reduced by 14 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And that is the same as taking more than 3.2 million gas-powered passenger vehicles off the road for a year. 49% of our emissions are from buildings, 41% are from transportation, and per capita emissions have reduced by 34%. And all of those are, and that's tracking between 2005 and 2023. Next slide, please. So 49% of emissions are from buildings. The two main things that go into that is the building energy consumption and the power sources across the broader regional grid. So this tracks the how clean the grid is in the two kind of grids that serve our region. So you can see there's been quite a bit of reduction since 2005 that's driving emission reductions across the region. Next slide, please. So this is showing electricity trends, so getting to that energy consumption piece. And while residential consumption has only increased 5% over the years, even though there's been like a 23% increase in population, there's been only a 5% increase in residential energy consumption. However, for commercial, the red bars across the years, we've increased commercial electricity consumption by 59%. And yes, data centers are contributing to that growth. Next slide, please. So this is natural gas trends across the years. You can see this is a lot more varied because natural gas really sticks closely to the weather. So colder winters means higher natural gas use. Warmer winters are years where there's lesser natural gas use. Residential consumption of natural gas has actually decreased by 11%, and commercial natural gas has decreased by 2% between 2005 and 2024. Next slide, please. So this chart relates to the goals that was mentioned at the beginning of the COG board setting a solar goal of 250,000 solar systems. When we started tracking this in 2009, there were under 500 systems in the region, and it's grown to, as of 2024, be more than 93,000 systems, surpassing the 1 gigawatt of capacity for solar. Next slide, please. Here's the regional green building trends. We've grown from under 100 green building certifications in the region in 2005, all the way up to more than 7,800 as of the end of 2024. Next slide. Electric vehicle ownership. So it's grown pretty significantly. The blue is your hybrids and the red is your battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So that's essentially like, the vehicles that need a charger, an EV charger. So we separate them out that way. To add up to more than 335,000 electric vehicles across the region. Our modeling that we did for the regional EV infrastructure plan from a couple years ago says that we'll probably have to be on a high end closer to like 900,000 vehicles. So there's ways to go on that. But again, this is only, we're using the latest data, and in most cases in this report, it's 2023, 2024 data. Green building was 2025. And actually trees, we only have through 2021. So it's, and I realize it's 2026. So just keep that in mind as we look at these. For the next slide, we look at electric vehicle charging trends. So these are charging ports across the region, public and private ports. In 2013, we had less than 700 ports, and now we have more than 6,800 ports, 1,000 of which is DC fast charge. The projecting we did showed that we would need about 1,000 DC fast chargers in the region by 2030. We already have that. But for level 2 charging, we're probably going to need 20,000, maybe even high 20,000s in ports to support the electric vehicles that we're going to need to meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Next slide. I didn't put tree canopy in here, but since I mentioned it at the beginning, I'll just say that the region is, as of 2021, slightly above 50%. But with the tree loss we've experienced for the 8 years prior to that, if that continued forward, we would be at like 49% right now. So it's possible that we could be, you know, under that 50% right now, but we won't know for sure exactly where we land until the next set of Chesapeake Bay Networks tree data comes out. But this is just the last slide here. The conclusions of the report. I mentioned these a little bit at the beginning, but here in a bit more detail. Good things. We did meet our 2020 goal of greenhouse gas emission reduction. We are experience a cleaner grid, significant solar development, more green buildings, cleaner cars, more EV charging. These are all great things. But we need continued exponential improvement in all of these positive areas if we're going to meet our 2030 goals. Some additional challenges are high energy intensive industries like data centers, getting more zero energy buildings on the ground and policies in place to help get those zero energy buildings on the ground. I mentioned the tree canopy loss is a challenge. But also, you know, just the report recognizes that there have been COVID impacts. There's COVID impacts that we're still feeling for VMT and transit, for waste diversion as well. And there's been industry shifts in solid waste that also, like, some are good, some are like not so good, right? Like less heavy shipping packaging, more plastics, right? So the report kind of recognizes these challenges. Then we can just go to the last slide that has my contact information. But yeah, just a reminder, it would be really helpful by the end of the month if you want to share any comments with us about this. If you would like to see the letter from the environmental organizations, we're happy to share that. But definitely interested in hearing perspectives, you know, even after the meeting, just shoot me an email about where, based off the data that we've been able to provide, where do you think that we stand in terms of meeting our 2030 goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. That was great. Questions, comments, anybody? This is your opportunity right now. I mean, you have more time, obviously, to do that as well, but she's here on the call. It'd be a great time if you have a question to ask her. So I don't see anybody. I have a question though for you. Maya, you mentioned this letter, and because so many organizations signed off on that, I don't know how others in the committee feel, but I would be interested in at least seeing it and see what they had to say.
Yeah, we can definitely share that. We did get a similar comment from the Coalition of Smarter Growth earlier in this year. So we tried to address a lot of those comments in the draft that, you know, is posted to your materials today. But they're definitely looking for more edits, and we're definitely looking into that and testing out some, you know, revised graphs and other edits.
Okay. Anyone else have any? Someone
It
say
looks like
something?
there's
Oh yeah. Amanda?
Hi, yeah, I guess I have a little bit of a technical question because we're about to present our annual report from last year, and so and I think we're gonna get some of the dashboard data, right? We get like a spreadsheet of like the buildings by jurisdiction, the green buildings and the solar by jurisdiction, basically. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we have, and I did send those out, I don't know, maybe last month or something, but we are, you know, we can send those out again. We're tinkering sort of the summary, dashboardy type tables. We have most of COG members summarized in most of those, but for cities in Maryland, like you guys at Rockville, you can see all the data for the addresses that have Rockville on them. So like the EV charging database, you have full addresses for every single location, and you can sort out by city of Rockville. But and same with green building and whatnot. But for some of those like that, we didn't summarize Rockville. But we can support you guys if you need help in doing those summaries, because we have to differentiate between what is inside, city of Rockville boundaries versus what is outside city of Rockville boundaries. So it's like that for the Maryland jurisdictions. All the data is there, but we didn't tease out in advance what's city proper versus the broader definition of Rockville, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it'd have to be sort of, I mean, yeah, most of our indicators, a lot of our indicators we report by zip code, just because like we have like crazy issues between zip codes overlap the city boundary, and some city addresses that say Rockville are not actually in Rockville. So that's usually kind of what we do anyway. But and then I was also curious about the greenhouse gas inventories. Like how, because I looked through the methodology, I was just trying to understand just generally, like, but I wasn't totally sure like how local is the data that comes from that, because like I'm guessing it's not really Rockville electricity use, or is it? That goes into the greenhouse gas inventory. And like, so it looks like our vehicle miles traveled went down a little bit. Is that just from the travel model for all of suburban Maryland? Or, and then like in terms of, I guess, the electricity grid, that's just like the whole region. But I was just trying to figure out, to the extent like our the like the vehicle, my other question was the vehicle efficiency. I guess like all of the vehicles across the region are improving in efficiency, but to what extent is that broken out by, like, does our electric vehicle purchases show up in that, in Montgomery County even, or is that going to be the same pretty much for all of suburban Maryland or all of the region, even based on the travel model?
Yeah, good question. So one thing is in the in the key performance indicators, we do have the zip codes in there for like green building and the EV charging stations, so you can filter it out easily by zip code as well. That'll probably be easier than trying to figure out what's in city proper or not. Like I know when we've done it before, we're just literally looking up every single address and making mapping it, making that determination. Now for now everybody has different results because they are as local as possible. So for energy consumption, we get it from the utilities, we get by jurisdiction, not the Maryland cities. We get everybody else by jurisdiction, but not the Maryland cities, but we do get by zip code. And we use data from the US Postal Service of what % of the population of that zip code lives within city boundaries and without of city boundaries. So when we get zip code level data from PEPCO, and it gives us a zip code and it says, 30% of that zip code is within, let's just say Rockville boundaries, and 70% is without. That's how we parse it out to get a more accurate estimate for the city of Rockville. So it's not perfect, but we do try to make it very city specific. But for the rest of the jurisdiction, for all the counties and the cities in Virginia and DC, that is the exact data from the electric utilities. But for the Maryland cities, we parse it out that way. Now, for transportation, the MOVES modeling is done at the county scale, as well as DC and Alexandria. So what you get for like the city of Rockville or the city of Falls Church, for instance, that is a downscale from the county. So it's not broad to the region, but it's a downscale from the county. So it's not perfectly city of Rockville. In the MOVES modeling, the number of electric vehicles, as well as all the vehicle fleets. So we collect and analyze VIN data from the states I believe it's every 3 years. So that tailors the results to each county. How many battery electric, how many plug-in hybrid electric, how many hybrid electric, you know, how many of this size sedans or this size trucks do you have? And then the MOVES model has an estimate of, like, you know, the emissions from Altimas versus Priuses versus whatever. So when that goes into the model, the electric vehicles in the VIN that are provided in the VIN data, obviously they get like you know, they kind of get a 0, right? But then there's so it's very tailored to the cars that you have within the county, that are owned within the county on the road. And then, like I said, we just downscale by population to the cities on the Maryland side. We everything else is as local as possible. So you all give us your waste tonnage data. We get you know, local as information as possible. I would say the transportation downscale to the cities is probably, you know, the biggest area that's just a downscale. And we've tried a number of different ways to kind of slice at that, and it all comes back to, we're still doing it the best way to get the best local results possible. Did I miss anything there? I know I didn't go over like every sector of the inventory.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And yeah, and it's definitely a balance of, like, you want to get the, you know, best information that's reasonably possible for everybody. And I know Rockville's kind of a special snowflake, and like, we're literally kind of shaped like a special snowflake. So it's hard to get our data really locally, but just to know, you know, what that source is helpful, so that we know, you know, if we buy, you know, city residents buy more EVs, that'll be reflected in the county, you know, numbers, you know, scaled by population. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And one last thing I'll mention is trees. We take a shapefile of the city and clip it right to the city of Rockville to get like the forest and trees changes. So yeah, we get as local data as possible, and in a few cases we have to downscale from the county.
And
Okay.
Madam Vice Chair, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Hopefully my audio is a bit better. Yes.
You're breaking a little bit, but definitely better. So thank you, Leah. Mia, that was great. I'm sure if you have more questions that I would be open to having you contact her directly. Am I offering support that you would do? I assume, yes. If someone has more questions, they can contact you and ask you, correct?
Really quickly, Valerie, sorry, I see a comment in the chat about the mid-course review, and I believe it's speaking to the inventory going up. And I just want to comment on that for a second, because what happened is that we did the 2020 inventory. It was right in the middle of COVID pandemic, and we analyzed it in the region, across the state of Maryland, across the US and internationally. The analyses that happened showed that COVID resulted in an artificial drop of emissions by 4 to 6%. So we found that to be the case for the region as well. And so it bounced back up from COVID. That sort of artificial drop in emissions is gone from COVID, but it bounced back up right in that range. So, and that's not a COG regional phenomenon. That's like a US global phenomenon of that COVID 4 to 6% drop, and then the 4% to 6% bounce back. So I think that when we do the next round of inventories, it's really going to tell whether we are actually going in the right direction or not.
Thank you, Maya. Okay, so moving on to next agenda item, it's Electrify DC. And they are going to present the conclusions of their work on the planning elements, including budgetary considerations of a regional homeowners hub. I know they've been working very hard on this, and they'll present their potential next steps for us to consider. So take it away. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I will share my screen. Try again. Oh no. Okay, WebEx. I have to quit and reopen.
I see today is a day that technology is testing our patience. So thank you for all being patient.
Vanessa, if you need me to do it, I can do it, but it's
I
up to
think
you.
I should be good. Thank you so much. The technical difficulties have been a real protagonist of this meeting. So, okay. Here we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, I wanted to start with a huge thank you to the 27 of you who have contributed to the discussions around the Homeowners Hub. Since we last spoke at BIAC, we have met another 4 times. These 1-hour meetings have been incredibly helpful in fleshing out what this Homeowners Hub, why it's needed, what should be in it, and how much it would cost. Despite the so-so news from our greenhouse gas inventories, I cannot help but notice that 50% of gas, over 50% of gas was used in our homes. And so this conversation is really relevant and really deserves the attention that all of you have been giving it. So I'm gonna fly over the first couple of slides because you know who we are. The only thing to note here is that we are now fiscally sponsoring the electrification coaches of the fabulous team at Go Electric DMV. We wanted to start off with the Healthy Homes Fair. Who has been to the Healthy Homes Fair this year? I can see from the participants that there's at least a good few of them. Rich, yes, I know Amanda was there. A number of you were there. We had over 2,000 participants. 98% of survey responders said that they will use what they have learned to take the next step in the decarbonization of their homes and the upgrading of their homes. And we had over 320,000 touch points, both in person and virtual, through an NBC4 segment, Facebook ads, Eventbrite, and these numbers do not include the number of your jurisdiction's newsletters that have featured the fair. So there is a huge need and desire for these resources to be available all the time. So not only the once a year that the fair happens. And we've seen this also in our surveys. People want more of these resources to be available on a permanent basis. And there was also a huge outcry for more resources for renters, and we have duly taken notice. So we can skip over this. You know why this is hard. There's not a tool that is specific for homeowners and renters. There isn't a place that is specific for them. There are shrinking budgets across the region, and there are very sort of good policies that unfortunately prevent government sites to be all that we would like the homeowners hub to be. So we can also go very quickly over this. We have, as a group, determined that we would really like a one-stop shop for homeowners and renters to feel like they're at the center of this experience. So user experience is definitely comes first in design principles here. And trust is a huge component of this. So we share the workforce, the climate, the housing stock, the decarbonization pathways. Let's figure out how not to duplicate efforts. And we've already talked about these three key advantages, but I wanted to zoom out on one of them. So economies of scale are clear. We're not maintaining 24 sites, we're maintaining one. When resources are catered to homeowners and renters, they do accelerate action because they provide direct access to the resources that homeowners and renters need right there in one place. And at times, they also provide the same resources to contractors who also need a lot of consistent information in this. But what we haven't talked about is how the hub can provide partner jurisdictions with specific outcomes. There are a number of things that we can measure through the homeowners hub that would help Maya and her team in determining how progress is really being made. So the COG, there was a question from Amanda in the chat. The COG does not fund the Electrify DMV network convenings. Those are funded by the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, but it did fund a one-off $15K towards this engagement around the homeowners hub. So these are the numbers. It was incredibly insightful. All of the energy and the expertise from all of you really helped zoom in on what is needed. And this is what is needed. This is the ranking across jurisdictions of the various modules that we would like to see in this homeowners hub. I will not go through each and every one of them, but I will just concentrate on the vetted contractor list, which was a top priority across every jurisdiction unanimously. The reason I would like to do this is because this is a point in case about why we need this resource. So at the moment, existing contractor finders in the DC region are not homeowner focused. So BPI, for example, is an excellent resource. It lists 21 companies. Only 10 of those serve homeowners or rent. They're often limited to just one brand or a trade. So even the fabulous, the Better HVAC Alliance resource for the DMV, you can see this picture here at the bottom, only shows 6 contractors and 6 listings, of which only 3 are contractors that serve directly homeowners. So the other thing that we're seeing is that there are resources being created like the Virginia Energy Connect contractor browser. And sorry, I just want to say this is in no way dissing these resources. These are great resources. So the one you see here at the top right corner is Rewiring America's contractor finder tool. And if I've put in my zip code and 25-mile range, that more or less covers the DMV. and have looked for energy auditors. And what it spits out, unfortunately, is the DC Green Bank, which does not provide services to homeowners, the BPI certified businesses that we discussed earlier, and Home Boost, which is a piece of hardware that you get through the mail. So all in all, no contractors that can be accessed directly through these resources. Virginia Energy Connect contractor browser, we're really looking forward to seeing which contractors will be listed there. But one thing to note there is that that list will be inclusive of contractors who want to replace like with like. So there is a need for this. And so I wanted to concentrate on this particular slide. The reason you haven't received this presentation earlier is because we did, with our board and with our staff, a really deep dive into these numbers to figure out where we could shave and bring together what we needed at a lower cost. And so these numbers are based on work that has consider work that has already been done by Electrify DC that allows us to cost this lower, and recently developed AI tools. The modules pricing is based on similar project that we have already completed in some DMV jurisdictions, and we think there are further savings to be had if all modules were to be contracted. So this is the best estimate that Electrify DC can give on this. And obviously different entities will price this differently. So the biggest ticket item on there, as you can see, is this maintenance of the modules. The maintenance is expensive, and that is because the best, most glitzy product is going to be worth nothing if it's not updated and maintained. And so I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's suffice to see that there are 24 electrification case studies per year. There are we foresee having to handhold 500 residents through electrification coaching for years. And so updating and vetting and is expensive and time consuming, but it is absolutely necessary. So why are we saying, like, how can we prove that the share investment is really where we need to go? So given the scale of this budget and the number of jurisdictions involved, we cannot see how this is workable outside of a funding mechanism like the COG, or at least with in very close partnership with the COG or a body like it. The quick sort of numbers on this, we tried to not point the finger at any jurisdiction specifically, but let's say that a jurisdiction has 500,000 people. So if they were to contribute proportionally to population, they would spend $45K a year. And based on assumptions around number of household and household size, we would be looking to a reduction of over 500,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. It is significant. So we think that this could be developed in 9 months. We have done similar things before, so we are very confident in this estimate. But this requires that governance and funding have been confirmed. So once governance and funding of this tool have been agreed upon, we would need an organization like Electrify DC would need 9 months till launch. So I've been rushing through this because I believe that discussion by this body is what is going to advance this. So I will conclude with next steps, which is really we need to agree on a governance framework. We need to agree on a practical funding mechanism. And we also need to agree on localized adjustments because some jurisdictions have already started implementing some or other component of the hub. And so we're looking at how we can gain knowledge and partner with what is already going on to build upon it, but also how those efforts can be supported on a sort of an ongoing basis through maybe the hub. So I would like to leave it up for questions. I have a good number of backup slides that show the work that Electrify DC has already been doing, the why the Electrify DMV network is important in this work, what the current vetted contractor lister of DC of Electrify DC looks like, what the hub's vetted contractor list should include at a minimum, and all of the wonderful people that have contributed to this work. I will stop presenting.
And I'll just jump in here, Madam Vice Chair, if that's okay, before you take questions from the rest of the committee. Just on the COGS perspective, this is proposed, as mentioned in the chat. COG provided a one-time support of $15K to sort of scope out the proposal for a regional homeowners hub. So again, we have not determined whether COG would provide additional financial support to implement the hub. So this is sort of the scope of what a regional hub would look like. And pardon me, and that is a proposal in terms of if COG would be the regional body, what it would look like. But it doesn't have to be COG either. So we are also sort of thinking the potentiality of a regional hub, and if COG would be the regional body to support it. And of course, we know that our local governments have to individually decide if they were going to support on their own. And so I'll open for questions. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leah. Yes, I open up to the committee. Do you have questions for Vanessa, her program, how it's laid out? Please feel free to either, come online or put it in the chat.
I think everyone's analyzing their mid-course review right now.
That might be true.
I don't know. I mean, I mean, I love if other people could chime in too. I don't want to be the only one asking questions, but for Rockville, I feel like outreach help is always appreciated, materials and all of this kind of thing, and just getting the word out. And in some ways, regionally, it seems like a little more efficient, and that it's going to include links to Electrify MC electrification program and other things that are local as well. Anything that can drive traffic to that, and then we could organize webinars or different things like locally to try to sort of leverage that. So I feel like it's pretty helpful at this point, because after doing building codes, a lot of the rest of the work is like voluntary, and so it's about getting the word out and getting the education out there, and educating contractors too. Like, that's a whole other thing.
Vanessa, I actually have a question. You talked about governance and funding, and you basically are seeking MWCOG to provide that support. But you also had in there that if a jurisdiction had like 500,000 people, then it might be $45,000 a year. Could you maybe explain, one, how you came up with that number, and what would that number provide for a jurisdiction?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ongoing maintenance of this platform, so the development of the platforms over the initial 9 months is just above 300,000. But the ongoing maintenance of it is the most expensive, and that is something around 550,000 a year. If that were divvied up on the basis of population, a population of 500,000 would be roughly 8% of that. So that would be that 45 would be the 8% of 55,000, which is of 550,000, which is what that jurisdiction would be contributing on a yearly basis for this resource that is updated specific to homeowners and renters, and that is integrated on the back end as Amanda was saying, to all of the resources specific to that jurisdiction.
So would it be, if you have more jurisdictions participating rather than less, that amount would then be distributed over however many jurisdictions in those populations? So that number could fluctuate depending on how many people were
Right,
participating?
that
Okay.
exactly. So that number considers that all jurisdictions would be participating. If not all jurisdictions intend to participate, then those numbers would have to increase. And I wanted to address the issue about contractors, because that is very much something that would be helped enormously through this tool. The contractor finder tool alone, the vetted contractor list, if managed properly with sufficient resources, can act as a really effective sort of midstream management tool where contractors are regularly informed about the various rebates and incentives, and are asked to sign electrification pledges on the back of trainings and information that they have received. And so it's a really effective way of maintaining contact with all of the contractors in the region, and sort of ensuring that they have the most up-to-date information about not only about incentives and programs, but also about technologies. So, for example, Electrify DC is planning a series of educational events for contractors on air-to-water technology, because that is the technology that is going to allow so many of our homes with radiators to ditch gas. And so being able to bring contractors along with things like that is really, really important.
Leah, do you see any other comments, or anybody else have any questions?
I do not see any other comments or hands raised.
I mean, have
My
you looked into other funding? Sorry, have you looked into other funding sources, like getting sponsorships from? Because, like, obviously, this would be driving business to those contractors. Like, could they have like a membership fee or something? Also, I'm just trying to think creatively. And grants, obviously, they might be fewer now than there used to be, but
Yeah.
or if it's something that can be funded somewhat through COG in some way, just because generally speaking, I'm trying to avoid ways of purchase, like any kind of purchasing process. It takes a lot of time and effort, but maybe the counties could purchase it on behalf of the cities or something like that. But that, it's just things to consider. If it goes through COG, it's just so much more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, Amanda. We've looked at all sorts of different ways that this could be funded, but the difficulty in coming up with purchasing from each just makes a body like the COG so much of a better option if we want to implement this anytime before 2050. But also, we did look into sponsorships, and some of the jurisdictions have a very sort of gut absolutely not reaction to that. And there were some discussions about maybe sort of curtaining off some elements of, like maybe some modules that could be funded through something like that, but it would make the participation of jurisdictions and the direct linking to these resources more problematic. And so balancing those two out is something that we want to absolutely explore. We think the jurisdictions should explore, but that might make it difficult for some jurisdictions to participate in the way that they might like.
Yeah, to your question, again, Amanda, we're in a decision-making phase, in this perhaps the same position as some of the local governments in terms of determining what's the next steps and level of support for the homeowners hub. And as mentioned at the beginning of the work program and budget, we are our work will have to be sort of scaled back to some degree because of our decrease in member dues. So we are thinking it through, and we're trying to determine if that, even if the financial mechanism through support through COG does work out, how would that look? And but we have not come to any sort of decision in that regard. But we've talked about kind of, the DMV Climate Partners page, so that model, would that host it or would it be something separate? But again, we're still thinking it through, even if we would be able to do something like that. And so yeah, I'm pretty sure, like, the individual jurisdictions are kind of thinking it through as well. And we hear you in terms of saying, COG, it makes sense for COG to be that body. But again, we are going through some financial things as well. But it's a place it makes sense for COG to do something like that. But we're trying to determine that.
Are you looking for feedback on that? Like, would it be helpful if folks sort of put in the chat, their thoughts, yay, nay, whether this kind of thing would support their programs? Is that
Sure. I
what
mean,
you're looking for?
you're welcome to put it in the chat here, or have sort of a one-off half an hour discussion with other local governments about it with COG. We're open to that as well. So it's really up to you guys, but we welcome it in any format. If you wanted to drop something here, I don't necessarily want to put individual jurisdictions or even COG on the spot and saying, yes, we want it to be, we want COG to host it. And we are getting in the chat, I see you, Ramita. Yes, we are 5 minutes past for this
Yep.
agenda item, for the energy affordability agenda item. So I would say, you still have the chat available to kind of give comments on this agenda item, but follow up via email with COG staff. So that would include myself, Jeff King, as well as Maddie Stoddard, who's been working on this as well. And Maddie, if you could put your email in the chat, and just follow up with the three of us if your comments, and if you're interested in having a one-off conversation. And so, Madam Vice Chair, I will
Sorry, can I just reply to a question in the chat? Sorry, Ramita, I will pass that on to you. But,
yeah, well, she's your staff, so you'll have to.
Ali, there is a budget broken down by module. Obviously, we did not share it because this is like that is our assessment, and I'll share it with you during at the end of this call.
Okay, that was a question I was going to say, that they asked that question in there, so I'm sure you can provide it.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
all right.
send the agenda, the presentation out. We got it late last night, so I can send it out to the COG, and it'll it'll overlap with some of your email or contact list as well. So
Okay. All right.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you, Vanessa. That was great. Lively conversation. That's always appreciated as well. So next we have Ramita, as well as with Electrify DC, who's going to discuss the relationship between electricity utility rate increases, grid-connected renewable energy systems, and the increase in energy costs customers are experiencing. And then we're going to take her questions after her presentation. So Ramita, take it away.
All right. So I will first try to share my screen and hopefully that works. Okay. Is this working?
yes.
And then you guys only see like my slides, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is on energy affordability in the DMV, but the first thing I wanted to do was kind of go over like how the utility actually recovers revenue. So all utilities, they follow this cost of service recovery model, which is a fundamental thing for any type of utility, whether it's electric, gas, water, whatever it is. Basically, they have to recover asset investments to provide some service to customers to achieve a fair return on their investments. So I think we've heard of this like net rate base and this regulated rate of return, which is sometimes like it's increased or decreased by the PSC and stuff. And this is where you can actually get a rate of return for the utility. But then the other cost that the utility also has to recover is basically depreciation of their assets, which is why they lean towards newer investments, because as your asset gets older, it depreciates over time. And then we also have operating expenses, which is basically like when you have to actually purchase electricity from the market, there's a variable expense to that. And so all of these things have to add up to whatever revenue required to recover the cost of service, which is allocated down to the customers. Oop. So, okay, cool. So something that like the more customers you have, you're basically able to reduce the price per customer down. And so utilities also benefit from the network effect of more people using their service. It reduces the cost per person. So the part of like this cost of service recovery model, there's two parts to it basically. There's something that we call a CapEx, which is capital expenditures, which are allowed to receive some rate of return or equity. And these things are things like long-term investments, like poles, wires, transformers, and even software solutions if they're a multi-year system. And then we have things that are operational expenses, which are basically pass-through costs to the customer, like procuring energy in real time, deviations and expected costs, and then things like maintenance and operations. And so we actually do kind of see that in our own customer bills. The bills tend to be made up of three components. We have a fixed charge, which is basically a subscription fee to connect to the grid. And this is essentially what your CapEx is. You're saying, hey, I'm accessing your assets that you have, and that is the charge that I'm going to receive on my end because I'm accessing it. And then you have something that's your volumetric charge, which varies with usage and is usually the highest part of our bill. And that's basically, again, the cost the utility incurs to procure bulk power for their customers. And then you have things like taxes, fees, surcharges. This is actually my own bill that I pulled. This was one of my lower ones. Sometimes like this electric supply charge, which is your operational expense, and the variable one, this one was a lot higher the month before when we had our like Snowcrete situation. But this is your distribution service charge, which is your CapEx, your utility assets cost of service. And this is also why one of our commissioners in DC, he basically stated that the PSC only regulates 33% of the bill. This is what he was saying, that these utility assets recovering the cost of the service is directly regulated, but this operating expense, which is procuring bulk power, isn't. It's like partially regulated. So that's kind of where like that mismatch, I guess you can say, comes from. So this CapEx, like we've said, it benefits from the network effect. More customers using the grid means less burden per customer. So that's why also like even though there's some thoughts around like, is more electrification good or bad? The more people you actually have using the service, it kind of means less burden per customer, unless you have like a large load customer like data centers. And then for your OpEx part, which it's partially unregulated. So a lot of this is geographically tied. You have exposure to like energy markets, capacity markets, as well as transmission costs. So energy markets, we have something called like locational marginal prices, which is basically like at each part of like your little grid, you have a lot of different places where PJM's basically measuring how much energy you're using and what supply is there. And that is like determined every 5 minutes and settled every hour. And so that ends up being like the real cost of electricity that you're purchasing. But that, of course, is like aggregated over a jurisdiction because most of us are flat rate users. So we're not going to be exposed to that. It's just going to be like in aggregate and then like divvied up amongst us. And then we have something called capacity market prices. And this is like a long-term cost. And this is actually the thing that a lot of people in PJM have been talking about, like the capacity auction going crazy from like 2024 to 2025, and actually this year maxing out. And this cost is also like propagated down to the customer because again, like if there's capacity and we're using it, we have to end up paying for it in some systematic way, right? So this is passed down to us, but it gets a little nitty gritty because the actual cost of capacity ends up changing per locational deliverability area. It's not just like across PJM. So we'll get into that part more. A lot of this presentation is focused on capacity markets, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. And then the part that we say is regulated, like the regulated part of your operational cost, is basically like how the utility is managing their hedging portfolio. So how they're coming up with like financial transmission rights, and making sure that when we do have things like congestion, that we're not directly exposed to like all this volatility in the market. And then you also have power purchase agreements where the utility is saying, hey, like I'm not going to get all my energy from the like PJM marketplace directly. I'm going to go and sign a direct agreement with someone and say, like, over the long term, over the course of 5-10 years, I'm going to be purchasing power from you directly. Okay, so let's go over the energy market part of OpEx. So like we've said, the price or LMP nodes across the region will vary, and it will also vary with time, determined every 5 minutes. So as supply and demand changes, that will change. If you're a generator, you get paid out your LMP directly, but load serving entities like utilities, they're subject to the temporal and geographical differences in procuring the energy. And so they're serving energy across LMP nodes, and they're also buying energy across LMP nodes and over a region much larger than the one they serve. And customers, we don't experience this variance at each price node because it's aggregated across the region, unless of course you have a time of use rate situation or you're somehow like directly exposed to that price. And the way this price is determined, it's not just supply and demand directly. There's 3 things that go into this. It's congestion, transmission, and marginal price of energy. So congestion, it's the same thing as traffic. Like you have more congestion, you have more demand, you have higher prices. And when you have more congestion too, less power can get to the grid or like get to your spot in the grid. And that's like additionally you have like higher transmission fees. So when you need more energy, you're typically pulling energy from other farther away places. And especially being in like the DMV area, we don't have a lot of generation. So we're always getting energy from other places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Northern Maryland, whatever. And so there's also like a delivery fee with that. It's like the same thing as like a DoorDash fee. Like if the restaurant is further away, you're gonna pay more. But this is a market mechanism. There's no way to actually like track electrons. So if more power is like, if it's like the market clears and I'm saying, hey, I need this generator over here, it's like, it's not like, oh, those electrons came from like Ohio to here. It's just, okay, this energy was kind of transferred here. And then that altogether ties into what we call the marginal price of energy. And so this is like, I think, the strangest part of electricity markets, but also why it's so lucrative to participate in it. It's basically, it represents the cost, like the marginal cost of the last amount of power needed to meet the last amount of demand. So if you have a bunch of people who are like, hey, I'm going to give you electricity for 10 bucks, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, but the one that we needed was priced at, let's say, $100, we pay that $100, and everybody else who bid at 10, 20, 30, they also get paid that 100. So that's like the really tricky part of electricity markets. But at the same time, if that's the thing we're able to reduce, then we can avoid having to use those more expensive sources of electricity that are farther away. And so like the main takeaway is this: more fuel intensive electricity that is procured from farther away during high prices periods of demand will result in higher prices of electricity. And now we're going to go into capacity markets. So capacity markets are something that is a long-term price signal. It's determined like the year before, basically. So for 2026 and 2027, PJM just did their like third incremental auction and they released those results March 6th. And so they basically like, they run this auction a year before to make sure that we have enough people showing up to like provide us power. And like people kind of started using the capacity markets more because they put a price ceiling on the energy market, so there were just less people showing up to provide power. And so a lot of this was transferred into the capacity market, where you're basically paying generators to show up on peak demand days. It's not even necessarily like, oh, you showed up, you get paid. It's like you just get paid for being there. But there were a couple things that really caused this spike here, which is the thing that people were like really upset about. And like there's like we had, what is it? Like I think the DC circuit sued FERC, I think, for not letting them rerun the auctions. So there's been a lot of like anger around that because this spike was just insane. Like 2024-25, you're paying $29 a megawatt per day, which is fine. But then you have, it's like 270 for 2025-2026. And there were like a couple reasons this happened, but one of the big things was this market rule change to actually measure the amount of supply we had. There's something got introduced where it was like effective load carrying capacity, and it basically just derated a lot of the supply we have. But even then, this 270 per megawatt day, this is like across PJM. Because our LDAs in the DMV, like our location deliverable area, we're so like constrained, we actually had like much higher clearing prices. And an LDA is basically like a pocket of the grid where you have to have enough capacity to be located locally because of grid constraints. Because like even though PJM is this big grid, big market operator, whatever, you can't always have power coming into the area just because you have like grid constraints. Like your cable's literally not big enough to push enough power through. And so these clearing prices can be a lot higher than the PJM one overall. And of course, like this cost of asking generators to show up is passed down because it's not like PJM is just an operator. And again, it's that cost of service recovery model where you're providing a service, you're doing some operation, and that cost gets passed down directly to the customer because who else is going to pay for it? So there were three main reasons this clearing price jumped. One was due to power plant retirements. The other was large load growth, of course, and then the modification to these ELCC rules. The reason the power plant retirements were not good, so Maryland put out this whole like paper basically on the impact of reliability must run settlement agreements. And there were 4 major power plants in Maryland, I think in the BGE region, where basically like they were gonna retire them because they're not like really used anymore. But PJM said because we're transitioning and we don't have enough capacity, you guys still have to run these plants. And so we had like more capacity costs because you're saying, okay, I have a lower supply and I still have this really high demand. So that price was already high. But then these RMR settlements basically are saying, I'm going to pay you to just stay open so that you're not going broke. And that cost, again, was passed on to the customer, and it was paid through customer rates outside of capacity markets so that, they're continuing past this planned retirement. And then this updated ELCC rule, we'll go into that a bit more. But basically, before they would average over a whole year, but now they've moved to a model that evaluates reliability every hour. So literally like the 8,760 hours of the day. And that resulted in lower class ratings. And that, even if we have the same amount of supply, you're all of a sudden saying, I have less supply. So these are like, you can literally see, like, just for batteries, there was this sharp of a decrease from just 2024 to like the 2025-2026 year. So like 4-hour storage, before you're saying that I have this asset on the grid, it's providing me some supply, it's 92%. And now it's 59%. And the same thing with like 6-hour storage, 8-hour storage, whatever, like it's decreasing by almost 30%. And so if you just say like, okay, my supply has decreased by 30%, that's not going to be good. And so that's like one of the major effects we're feeling. And like solar, like here, it's crazy. It's like it was 30%, 50% before, but now it's almost 9%. So it's also kind of like, even if you have a large solar power plant that's going, oh, this is like a 100 megawatt site, all of a sudden it's only 9 megawatts in terms of like your capacity auction. So these effects were not good. And then even for 2026, 2027, there's been further reductions because they again updated the ratings to basically account for like a greater share of winter risk. And that's because of like the storms we had and stuff. They just want to make sure that we actually have enough supply showing up during that peak demand. But you can see like storage has gone down even more. Storage that was in 2024, 2025, 100% is now 50%. And so it's really not good. The only ones that are not lower is onshore, offshore wind, hydro, and nuclear. Those are the only ones I think have actually gone up. So it's kind of also, I think, in terms of like what investments we make and what's registered in PJM and even our power purchase agreements, that kind of affects like how we're going to be investing in new generation. And this is actually, so these are just PJM docs. I did not make this pie chart. It would be more legible if I did. But you can see like from 2025, 26, like all these acronyms basically mean like reliability of when we think we're gonna have more events where demand is bigger than supply. And so like the summer one just got lower and lower, but the winter one took up a bigger share. And so that's like why they updated the ratings to say like we care more about reliability during these periods of time versus like in the summer. Yeah. And so 2026, 2027, all of our capacity auctions for all of the regions, they all hit the max. And this max is actually this new ceiling that was approved by FERC. Before, I think the max was like, I want to say close to 450, because they take basically the cost of operating your like lowest cost generation unit. So it's like something that's like an oil fired turbine. And they base it off of that. So before it was like 1.5 times that price, and then they reduced it to 1.3. But now we also have a price floor. So basically there's not like a lot of movement in terms of where your capacity price is gonna go. And in terms of like the forecasted peak load and stuff, like data center expansion obviously is adding more. For like the year over year addition, it was an additional 5,400 megawatts in terms of our whole peak load. And so we are, we're having even more demand, and like supply ratings are decreasing. And in some LDAs, especially the ones in DMV, like I think both the BGE LDA, which is the one in Maryland, and then the one in like DOM, which is Dominion, Northern Virginia. I mean, this ceiling is lower than the clearing price from last year, but it's still like, even though the price is lower, it still doesn't change the fact that we have a huge shortage of supply. So how expensive is this reality, and how does that cost get allocated to the customer? So this very much depends on your jurisdiction and your utility. BGE has great content on how like each customer actually gets allocated this cost, but then in Dominion, like I'm on a flat rate tariff, even if I like use less, I'm still kind of like having to pick up the cost of everyone else not using less. So the way this is measured is a little weird. There's something called peak load contribution, which is assigned to each customer, and that is literally just like how much did you contribute to the peak load. And this is determined retroactively. So basically, PJM looks at us over the course of the summer, and then at the end of the summer, they say, hey, what were your 5 coincident peak hours or 5 CP of the year? And then once they have those peak hours, that's basically like applied for the next year. So if like in 2025 you used a bunch during these peak hours, then like technically next year, depending on your jurisdiction, you might be having to pay more because you use more capacity. And it's just, I mean, it makes sense. It's like a weighted average, right, of your usage. But then again, it's like if you're on a flat rate, it just averages out. So each customer is allocated a portion of the capacity costs based on their usage from the year before. And again, that's like a little, it depends, like some jurisdiction might do it like over the past 3 years, some might do it over more, it just depends. So with all this, how do we actually stabilize all these market dynamics and not really feel it as much? So I know we said before that like the unregulated, partially regulated part of the operating expenses is going into like long-term power purchase agreements. But the problem is those are still subject to ELCC class ratings for PJM, because PJM is determining for each LDA, like they're still responsible for us. And so even if you're like, no, like I know my solar plant is good, I don't agree with your 8% rating, I want it to be 30%, they're not going to agree with that. And so those power purchase agreements we have, they're still subject to ELCC class ratings. So it's not really like the best way to go through that, I don't think. And so like something we can do, essentially something that's in our power, is reducing our demand. And so reducing your peak load contribution during these like peak events so that we can reduce that capacity clearing price for our LDA. And then the other part too, and this is a very like weird part of electricity markets, and like there's something called financial transmission rights, which is basically like a hedging portfolio that each utility sets up. And it's a very like odd mechanism, but it's basically a contract that hedges against congestion occurring. So I know we talked a little bit about like how LMP nodes can vary across the region, but it is literally that. Like if whenever you have generation closer, you're gonna have like a lower price, like let's say $30. And then if you're in a place that has a lot of demand, that's like 100. And so that price difference of like 70, 100 minus 30, that ends up being a financial transmission right that energy trading firms buy and then sell to utilities. So when that congestion occurs, like you're not penalized for the $30 and $100 difference because they bought that contract. They're going to get the $70, and so that's like a buffer against congestion. And this portfolio is regulated by the PUC, but I think it's still a bit difficult to regulate, and it's not public information. I've tried finding like what the hedging portfolios are, but investor-owned utilities, they're not going to have that necessarily be public information. Okay, so back to the capacity thing. We're trying to reduce the capacity clearing price, right? And so like the way we do that, it's your traditional supply demand curve. like from Econ 101 of you have this demand curve that you want to shift to the left so that you can reduce this price, and you want to basically increase your supply and shift that to the right to get this little price to go down. This curve, this VRR curve, it just stands for like variable reliability. I don't even remember resources, I think, but it's just basically like, okay, like your demand, and then there's like usually a little drop off, and then this flat part. But that's changed a lot because of our price floors and ceilings. And this supply curve, I think, was just made up. I just got it from this document. And then these red lines that I've added, it's to demonstrate like if I can move the supply curve out that way, like I have more supply, then I'm reducing this, what they call like the clearing price, where the supply and demand curve intersect, and that ends up being the price of like capacity that your LDA is assigned. And this like same concept is like applied all across electricity markets. We have the same thing for energy market clearing prices, where you have your supply demand. We check that every 5 minutes, and that determines like your price of power. So what are our options?
Ramita, can I interject just for a minute? This is all wonderful, great information.
I'm trying to tell
Our
you
meeting
that.
usually, no, I usually our meeting stops at noon time, and I want to make sure that you hit your highlights and that people can
Yeah.
have a chance to ask any questions. So
Mhm.
do you have a lot more slides, or how are
I
you
think that's a
doing
lot more side. I'm
presentation?
getting into like the solutions part. So this is something that I think this is like the important part too. But
I also want to put forth, if folks don't mind, if Ramita goes over 5 minutes, or we end at 12:05, if that would be okay with folks, because obviously Ramita put a lot of work into this information, and I think it's really valuable, and we may want to have like additional conversation built around more of the details of what she's presented. And so I'm getting some thumbs up. It is up to you, Madam Vice Chair, but let us know.
I mean, I think that the
Y-
presentation is great, and I would love to see. I just don't want anyone to say, well, I couldn't get to the end, or I didn't hit your key points, but I would love to stay. The
okay, yeah,
committee
I'm getting
is
some
updating
thumbs
us.
up. So
Okay.
and this is recorded, right? So
yes, it is recorded.
okay, cool. I shall continue then. All right. So yeah, I'm getting into the solutioning part. We've heard about all the problems. So what are options to reduce our bills? So, increasing supply, reducing demand. Um, this decreasing ELCC rating does not help with supply issues. The only ones that are currently above 65% are 10-hour storage and actually demand response. And this is actually like a really good thing, because demand response is just registered demand response programs. It's not resource intensive. Like, you don't need a lot of time and capital to build that out. It can happen quite immediately. And you actually have two parties that can do this. You have your utility program, so your LSE can be registered as a curtailment service provider, and actually say like, okay, I promise like this demand response is gonna happen when you need it to show up. And you have like a whole nother group of like independent service providers coming up, people like Voltus. But basically it's like you have to have enough demand response for it to actually like move the curve. And again, like, really, it's a matter of being really intentional about when we reduce our peak load. It has to be during these like 5 coincident peaks, which is difficult because they determine that retroactively. But like with weather forecasting and demand forecasting, like we can figure out when those things are likely to happen. And the benefit of a good demand response program and like the network effect of it can be felt in the following year. So if like we do this really well in summer 2026, in 2027, when they're determining and rerunning our auctions, we can have lower electricity prices. And so how much do we have to reduce the demand for it to be meaningful in terms of our money? We have to look at each LDA's variable resource requirement curve, which was that demand curve that I was showing before. which is used in capacity auctions. And like PJM posts all the parameters for each LDA, so this curve can be very easily reconstructed. I've also added the link for that. And these peak load events, like that 5 CP thing I was talking about, this happens only during the portion of June from like the summer. So June 1st to September 30th. That's the only time they're measuring for the 5 CP. So if we can really target our demand reduction during that time, we're gonna see savings later. And then there's like another one too for transmission, and that's like over a 12-month period, but I don't really go into transmission in this presentation at all. And the capacity thing is the one that really caused a lot of the price spikes. So this is an example for the Dominion region, Northern Virginia. So this is the VRR curve we have for 2026, 2027. As you can see, like our clearing price was the price ceiling. And before, like we could have more like variation down here, but with the price floor that's been applied, that like goes out to 177. So we can't reduce the price any further, which is a little odd, but it is what it is. But what we can do is basically we want to intersect this curve at a different part, right? And so what we have to do is we have to figure out, okay, this is like, how do I get to this point, right? And that requires a shift of supply of basically 248 megawatts. And then we have to keep in mind that because of the ELCC rating, you have to have a bit more. So it's around 360 megawatts of demand response. So if we're actually able to prove, like this summer, that we have this supply, 360 megawatts of demand response, you're gonna have a lower clearing price. And not to mention that impacts your demand curve as well, because if you're doing that during your 5 coincident summer peaks, you're shifting your demand curve and you're proving to PJM that, hey, like I don't need as much capacity as you think I need because our peak demand is a lot lower. And this was the link for the Excel sheet. So if you guys want, we can do this for like the other LDAs in like the DMV region. And so what are like good demand response programs? It's not just like your smart thermostat shifting, right? It's if you have a battery, it's shifting load, like a copper oven or a home plug-in battery, or even like doing your EV charging at a later time. And it's also like just not using energy from the grid. So if you have local generation like rooftop solar, balcony solar, and you're using it during those times, you're again gonna see like that reduction of the peak load. And it's really like any smart appliance that's able to shift power consumption from these like really high load times. But the thing is, like, you have to ensure that demand response actually happens. So it should be financially binding so that people understand, like, if I don't participate in this, there is some like financial consequence, which sounds a little harsh, but it's like, if you don't show up during that time, you're gonna be feeling the pain either way. And what's nice about like the 5 CP situation is historically it's always been when the sun is out. So for 2025, it was like 3 p.m., 6 p.m. summers. And like all the DRs we've mentioned above, they can work at these times. And again, like a lot of times we talk about like, oh, solar doesn't show up. But if it's like, it's hot enough for like peak load, the sun's probably out and like your balcony solar is probably generating, right? So you can be using those resources instead. And does this all really matter? I think yes, because we know just mathematically we can shift the supply demand curve and that results in a lower clearing price and that gets propagated down into our cost of service. So if we actually have targeted demand response and we can reduce our capacity and transmission costs in the long term, and reducing demand in real time again also reduces energy costs. So we have a lot of like benefits we can garner from this. So like a goal would be this summer we reduce our impact as an LDA during forecast peak demand, and we have a lower capacity clearing price, and that's propagated through lower retail rates, and that depends on jurisdiction and utility, but then you're allocated a lower portion of the cost of capacity for 2027. And so for this, I actually pulled my own green button data. Mine's a little different because I was out of the country for the summer. And so if it was like if it was like BGE or something, technically like I didn't have any load during these 5 CP events, right? So I wouldn't have to like pay for capacity, but I'm on a flat retail rate in Dominion, so that's not really the case. Like I still have to have like the aggregate share of capacity related costs. But this is like the type of analysis we can do for like any customer really, and any LDA, to say like, hey, like let's reduce during these times, and then that's how we get like some savings. So yeah, this is my last slide. Our solutions are: demand risk programs should be targeted based on LDA, not just jurisdiction or utility. The problem with that is you have utilities overlapping within an LDA, and like an actual coordinated response of getting that network effect of a good demand response program is difficult without some cross collaboration amongst local and state governments. Like the BGE one in Maryland, I don't really know my states like that, but I think it overlaps with Delaware, I want to say. And so it's a different utility, but it's the same LDA, and like your cost is assigned that way, right? And so the program has to be targeted based on that region. And yeah, we want to harness the network effect of demand response. And the network effect is like, it's a fundamental aspect of why utilities and like cost of service recovery models have historically worked. Just the more people you have participating, the larger effect you're gonna feel. And even people who aren't participating, like if it's a lower amount, they're still gonna be able to have some benefit, which is really cool. So I think also another thing is, like, to wrap up, like demand response program benefits are very poorly communicated, and the incentives are really not clear to customers. Like I'm in the smart thermostat program, and all I see is, oh, I get like a $25 check at the end of the year, but it needs to be communicated that if you have enough people, your real incentive is less capacity costs for the next year. And so there needs to be like a little bit of messaging and like education around that as well, I think. But yeah, I think I'm done. I need a deep breath after that. I've also added all like these appendix slides, so you guys can see like, ELCC framework, why did this happen? These are like the LDAs that we have across PJM. So like BGE, oh yeah, BGE, is that Delaware or is that Pennsylvania? I think it
Do
overlaps a
you
bit.
have time for one question? There's like a minute left.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Actually, I don't, yeah, I'll stop sharing. Okay, yeah, one question.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I will say, oh, I will say that while people are thinking that, you likely, as well as I know I will have to kind of listen to this presentation again and probably pull out some questions that may not be readily come to mind now. And so I would suggest that you email and I'll put it in the chat, myself, and BIAC leadership, Valerie, as well as Al and Maddie, to see if we can have additional conversations around this discussion, because we've said before that we wanted to build this conversation out into a series, and obviously it's a lot of information there that Ramita has so brilliantly presented to us. So I'll put Al, if you're still here, and Valerie, if you could put your email in the chat. And I think you all have my email already. Email us, and any questions after you've kind of digested this and said what you want to follow up on.
Yeah, please go through the recording and the slides. The slides have a lot of information, a lot of good links. Like whatever information I found, it was not ChatGPT, it's real PJM links. So please go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the recording will be posted later this week or early next week on the page, and I will send that out again, the YouTube recording.
Okay, well, with that, just so we know, our next meeting dates are going to be June 18th, September 17th, November 19th, all virtual. And Alea, do you have an announcement to make as well?
Just really quickly, Maya already said it. We are in our 12th year of the Climate and Energy Leadership Awards. It will launch on Wednesday, Earth Day. Look out for an email from myself or Maddie Stoddard. I actually have jury duty starting tomorrow, so but you'll get an email from CogStaff about it.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Then I think we are done for today. Thank you for all the wonderful presentations, for everybody attending, and I know Leah will follow up and send us links and information that we've already requested. So
Yes, thank you all. And again, apologies for the all the technical difficulties. Have a good day. Bye.